So thank you everyone that is tuning in, that's watching out there. Really excited to come to you with another opportunity for IAVA and some special guests to talk to you. Today, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be much more quiet, I think, than I usually am in the past, so I think that's a good thing. So what I am going to do is first introduce our staffer, Hannah Sinoway, and then I'm going to let her introduce our external guest, and then I'm going to turn it over to them to really lead this conversation. So very quickly, I'm Jeremy Butler. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Really appreciate everyone being here. Honored to introduce Hannah Sinoway, who is IAVA's Executive Vice President for Strategy and Engagement. But that is kind of a mouthful and doesn't begin to really describe everything that she has done and continues to do for IAVA. She's actually our longest serving staff member, has been with IAVA for over 7 years now. She is she has a master's degree in counseling. She came on board with us, like I said, 7+ years ago, and immediately started in our program and was doing direct counseling and interaction with veterans around the country through our rapid response referral program. She did that for a number of years, eventually moved up to management of the program. We renamed it and expanded the scale of the program. It's now the Quick Reaction Force. It's available 24/7, 365, and Hannah was really the guiding force behind making that happen. And now she's really running that program and bringing more care to more veterans than ever before. So really honored to have her with us. You've probably heard her, if you have tuned in on these in the past, you hear her voice in the background asking questions that we get from the community. This time it just made sense, given our external guest, that she'd be in front of the camera. So Hannah, thank you for switching up your roles today, and I'm going to turn it over to you. So thank you for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks to everyone who's tuning in. Really excited to have Dr. Hoyt as our guest today. Dr. Hoyt is the Deputy Division Chief of the Psychological Health Center of Excellence. And as Jeremy mentioned, I've been with IAVA for about 7 years, and one of my central roles is to oversee our Quick Reaction Force program, which is really an incredible program. It's available to any veteran, any family member. We do comprehensive care management, 24/7 peer support, and really work to get folks connected with whatever support and help they need, regardless of the issues and the challenges that they're facing. And one of the reasons that we're really, really excited to have you on today, Dr. Hoyt, it's been a tough year, I think, for most of us, for the veteran community. And with the holidays coming up, we wanted to take this opportunity to have a conversation and a discussion with you and really talk about, ways to cope with the holidays and just other ways to ensure that folks are getting the help that they need during this time and really moving forward as well. So I'll pass it over to you, and we're really excited again to have you here today.
It's great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to so many of my fellow veterans and to talk about these critical resources, right? I think so often when we're working up at the program level, myself coming from Defense Health Agency, where we are still DOD, we are still, what many left behind and said, like, hey, I don't want anything left to do with DOD. We're still providing those programs, and so many of us as veterans, I think, fall into those traps of saying things like, hey, I've been trained to be self-sufficient, I'm going to do this myself. Right. And that translates into, a variety of things, whether that's leaving benefits on the table that you are eligible for, or not reaching out when it is time, when I need to take a knee. Those are all of those critical times when we can't let ourselves get in the way of addressing those problems, whether that is struggling with PTSD, whether that's struggling with thoughts of suicide. Those are the times when we have to say, like, not the I'll do this myself, I only rely on number one, but instead saying every single day in the military, I was relying on battle buddies. I was part of a squad, I was part of a platoon, I was part of a group that was cohesive, that was working together, and we all had our own sectors of fire. So support and prevention efforts for the issues that veterans face really boil down, I think, to those things. So many of these programs, like the things that are sponsored by IAVA, are going underutilized sometimes. You know, we see that in our transition assistance program resources when people are getting out of the military. We see that in the programs that I run, such as the In Transition program that similarly provides, you know, transitioning services and can help veterans or service members get a hold of the resources they need. And just really across the board, we see that those resources are underutilized. So if we're all here with our hand out toward our fellow veterans saying like, hey, take hold, like use this resource, like we are paying these people, they're here to help, like that is so crucial. Now let's fast forward this into the COVID environment. Right? We don't have the solid data yet, but we pretty well know, and you could probably ask anybody, depression is up this year. In surveys, nationwide surveys that have gone out, anxiety is up this year. Any of those problems that you've been facing, like if you were having some financial struggles before the pandemic, it's only exacerbated the problem itself and your ability to resolve that, and then the stress that you're feeling worrying about that every day. You know, if you had legal problems before the pandemic and now you can't get a court date to get that resolved, you know, that is so much more of that stress, right? And so, you know, as much as we can, you know, we have to continue to say it is okay to ask for help right now, right? That I think is the main message that we really start with. More than any other prevention activity or any fancy treatment, it really is the matter of like, right now it is okay to ask for help. Right now is a time when you can say, hey, the coronavirus beat me down, whether actually or metaphorically, and I'm raising my hand for a little bit of help here. I'm taking a knee, I need a little bit of help. And so let's talk specifics of that, right? A lot of people are going to be isolated during the holidays, whether that's because of quarantine, because of some of these state mandates that are coming out, because of just care for each other and making sure we don't want to, you know, increase exposure risk, right? Now, all of us, I think especially veterans, like to have that time when we're alone, right? But how much is too much before you start to say, wait, I'm isolating, wait, I'm avoiding, right? We may be used to things like, you know, geographic isolation when we're up at a remote duty station, not hearing from family for quite some time, or just being sort of socially isolated, feeling like we're separate because of our veteran background, because of, you know, maybe not always having shared experience. But, you know, if we really use this time to reach back out, you know, to reconnect with those, whether it's a former battle buddy, whether that's someone we haven't talked to in a while, or whether that's a family member that, you know, we are going to miss during the holidays, that social connection really is where it starts, right? That we have to make some of those attempts. Now, it can be tough if we make that first attempt and somebody says, well, no, you know, I don't want to talk to anybody right now, or they don't respond, right? That can almost be the worst. It's just no response. I sent you an email and I didn't hear back. We can't let that get us down because we don't know what they're struggling with either. We can be mutually supportive in that and reaching out and really saying, hey, I am here. I'm reaching out because we had some great memories together, whether as fellow veterans or as family members, and I'm reaching to connect during the holidays. And the more that we do that, the more that spreads, right? So that we start to recognize those of our brothers and sisters who really are struggling during this time.
That's well said. Couldn't agree more. I think, you know, we've gotten folks are, you know, kind of really nervous sometimes to check in with people that they're worried about. I think there's this misnomer. If I check in and if I come out with it and say, you know, are you having thoughts of killing yourself, that's somehow going to plant the seed in someone's head. So can you talk a little bit just kind of about that, and then maybe also risk factors for all of us to be aware of, whether it's with ourselves or someone in our life that we're concerned about, especially as the holidays are coming up?
Yeah, well, That's exactly it, right? That we sometimes don't know what to say. And let's challenge that myth first and foremost, that like asking someone about suicide isn't going to suddenly give them an idea like, well, now I'd never thought about suicide before, but now that you mention it, you know, that is not how it works. You know, much more often it's someone is actually struggling. And if we take the opportunity to say, like, you know, you really seem down today, you really seem off today, I'm worried about you. And, you know, is this one of those times when, just like all of us, when we're facing a stressor, has it crept in, maybe a few thoughts of suicide, right? Asking in that gentle way, right? Acknowledging that, like, this may cross all of our minds at some point during this pandemic, right? That those down days happen. That's not going to now exacerbate the situation. That is going to show, like, okay, I'm willing to go to a difficult place with you. You know, just like, you know, when we were in trenches, or when we were wherever we were as veterans, right? That I'm going to go there with you, and I'm going to say, like, hey, I am genuinely worried about you, right? And maybe they do come back with, you know, this has been a difficult time, I have been thinking about it. You know, let's then have those steps. Once we've had the courage to ask, let's not retreat. Right? And so the best things that we can do, and this is, you know, based on the research literature, things we can do, that's myself as a clinician, but also any of us, are having a safety plan with the people that we're worried about. Now, that might be myself, right? That I'm writing out my own safety plan for, like, when I'm having a bad day, these are the steps I'm going to take to make myself more safe. Or crafting that with a buddy, you know, that's, you know, maybe I sit down with them, and, you know, some of the things that can be effective are, let's write down who you're going to call or who you're going to text when you're having an off day, right? And that's easy. You know, you don't have to admit to anything. You don't have to say, like, hey, I'm calling in a lifeline on my text, I'm suicidal today. But it can just be a gentle reach out that's like, hey, you know, today's a rough day. You're my buddy on my safety plan. I'd like to reach out and talk, right? And then maybe a backup buddy on the safety plan, right? You know, when we do this with guys who are on active duty, we'll have 2 or 3 numbers on there, and then maybe a commander's phone number as well. You know, that is, here's some people to reach out to, and then follow that up with, like, what else am I going to do to make my area more safe, right? And if that is, make sure that we've locked up the alcohol for the afternoon or the evening, that's not going to be our main coping strategy today. If that is, hey, I'm going to make sure that my firearms are stored for the night, that tonight's not the night to be out cleaning my rifles or my handguns or anything, you know, taking those steps to decrease the danger in my environment, right? Those are crucial things to think through when we're having a clear-headed day, so that when it's a difficult day, when it's one of those days when the PTSD gremlins start to get back at us, that it's on paper, it's written down, okay, let's take these steps. The same way that we would prepare for, you know, contact in a convoy, I know my steps when it's time to respond and be more safe.
Those are really important points and good to keep in mind. Shifting the conversation slightly, with QRF, we've seen an uptick with every need, unfortunately. But something that I've noticed over the last couple months is we're getting more and more cases from folks who are in recovery. So veterans who are in recovery from alcohol or drug addiction. And the pandemic has clearly had, you know, a pretty big impact on a lot of folks and has thrown a big wrench in that. Recovery, you know, it's not stagnant. What works today, what worked last week might not work tomorrow, might not work next week. So a lot of folks who are in recovery, right, they go to in-person meetings, finding that kind of purpose and sense of belonging and value and being a part of something bigger than yourself is so critical and so central to that. And with COVID, it seems that that's made it really, really difficult for folks. So I wanted to open up the conversation with you, Dr. Hoyt, and just get your perspective on that. You know, different ways that folks can kind of get creative with their recovery and try and get ahead of it. Because as we all know, it's not something that can be left untended to.
Definitely. And I think that's been the hardest part of, coronavirus for a lot of people, is that it disrupted routine, right? Anytime that, we're working with someone, whether it's, as psychologists, people who are, developing young children or those going through recovery, really making sure that we've got some sort of stability in our lives, some sort of predictability, really helps to facilitate psychological health overall, right? And so if we apply it directly to your question here with recovery, having a way to create that regular cadence really, I think, is the best way to fight through this difficult time, right? Obviously, when we're alone, if we're just holed up at our house, that is going to be a perfect opportunity for, like, hey, I'm going to fall back on bad habits. I'm going to, drink more than my fair share of the holiday cheer. And so, getting back to meetings, whether that's virtual meetings, whether that's being in contact with a sponsor, again, reaching out as a sign of strength, as a sign of, like, I am committed to something bigger and longer term than is just this pandemic or just another excuse to drink myself under the table or use or whatever that might be. And so, the same way that we talk about connecting with others, that is what it's going to be, that we need to support each other in getting through and maintaining recovery during this time.
Great. Jeremy, anything to add? Not trying to leave you out of the conversation. You want to jump? No pressure, though.
No, I appreciate it. It's good. I'm enjoying listening. I think one of the things, there's kind of two things that were touched on that maybe now is time for one of them, maybe other ones for other time. But I think a lot of times, and I know I felt this way personally before I kind of got into this role and got more into depth with it, but I think a lot of people know that they should ask if someone is struggling. I think the issue is that they often don't know what to do if they get a positive answer back. It's sort of like, I need to ask, but then what do I do? And I've dealt with this in my own personal history with a friend of mine, a close personal friend who had a problem with alcohol, and I confronted him about it. And he, after several iterations of denial, finally admitted he had a problem and wanted some help. And I struggled to find some place to turn for help. And now I know we have things like Quick Reaction Force, and there's other places for people to turn. But I think from what I've certainly seen, and I think we're moving in that direction, that people need better access to what do you do when someone is in a moment of crisis or coming up to a time of crisis. And so hopefully there's increasing opportunities. I think it's easier when folks are on active duty because Dr. Hoyt, as you were saying, you can turn to your chain of command and things like that. But it's then once you've made that transition out where all of a sudden you find that you're a little bit cut off and more on your own. So I don't know if there's necessarily a question there, but I think that that's certainly something that I've seen is people struggling with, what to do if you get that answer.
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Dr. Hoyt. Would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that follow through, I think, is critical, because if we do get the positive answer and then we freak out and retreat, then it's like, oh, wait, I'm not going to admit to this anymore. I can see I can't rely on this person. Always the best thing to do is just to be present and listen, right? Hear what else they have to say. And that is totally natural, right? There is no psychological trick to that. It's just a matter of be with the person, whether it's a loved one or a fellow veteran, and just hear what they have to say for a little while. And often that can be very, very helpful to just get that out and say, like, this is a secret I've been carrying with me, say that I might struggle with thoughts of suicide, get that out in the open. And once it's out there, it becomes much more tangible. It becomes something that we can deal with. And then once they feel heard, then we can start to put in there, well, is there anything else I need to do, right? And I think the first is, hey, now that you have come to me with this, I don't want to say secret, but this disclosure, I am now a trusted partner to call me again, right? Feel that it is okay to say this to me in the future. If you're having a bad day, if I need to be part of your safety plan, or make sure that my number is in your phone right there, ready to call, right? If it's more serious than that, I think the thing that Jeremy really highlighted there is, let's make the call together, right? Whether that is to the QRF, or to, say, the Veterans Crisis Line, or to whatever resource is readily there at hand. Make the call and say, I'm going to make the call together with you, right? Let's try this together. And if we're saying, then I'm with a friend of mine and he's really struggling today, we're wondering what kind of resources are there, then it simultaneously provides that accountability for, like, hey, we are going to take some steps today. And it shows them you're not walking this alone, right? And so, none of that requires any specialized training or anything else, right? It's be present and let's call together. The same as if, like, you were, struggling with a bathroom call here. Well, hey, let's try calling together. Let's try, making a call, working this out together, right? All of that baseline stuff, none of it requires an advanced degree or a psychologist or anything else. And then if it really is serious, if you're really talking about, this is a time when I'm actively thinking of suicide, or, I have lethal means and I've made some kind of plan. Those are the times to say, let's really take some steps to decrease your risk right now. And maybe that's, hey, can I keep a hold of the key to your gun safe for a couple of days, right? Just for safekeeping. We're not, trying to take anything away, but just to say, let's make sure this is safe. And that I, as a trusted friend, have got the key for a few days. And then in those really, if it really is serious, go with them to the emergency room, right? And I would say that as not to say a last resort, but again, let's support each other in getting that help, right? Because that can be a way to continue reaching out together, to continue seeking that care. And so, that I hope would give people some steps, right? That, again, listen first, call together, make the place safe, and then reach out for emergency help if needed. And that really sets us up in a much better place if we do get that positive answer and it's time to intervene.
That's such a good point too, Jeremy. Like, I relate to that both in my personal and professional life, especially when I started doing the QRF work. And I can remember, like, the first time I asked a client and I was holding my breath, right? Just being like, please don't say yes, please don't say yes. But there's something almost beautiful about getting that information from someone, because if you hadn't asked them, maybe they would never have told anyone. And then you're in a position, take a breath, like Dr. Hoyt said, right? Take the steps that you need to take. And you don't have to be a trained professional to be able to, stand beside someone to try and keep them safe. But that's a great point. And I think, Jeremy, you said there was a second point that came up for you.
It was something, I don't necessarily know if Dr. Hoyt is involved in this, but it was mentioned with one of your earlier comments. It's something that everyone transitioning out of the military is familiar with, and that's the TAP class that we go through, Transition Assistance Program, I think is what it's talked about. And I know I think I know, at least it was back in my day, that every service sort of runs its own program. And I know a lot of veterans, or I guess then service members, active duty service members, their thoughts are on the future. So a lot of times it's kind of, you get out of it what you put in it. But Dr. Hoyt, I don't know if you can speak to if you've seen improvements, or if even if this is outside of your purview, we can just skip on over it. But it made me think of if you have any insights on if TAP classes in general are improving, if there's areas in which they can be improved to touch on these types of things. I know they have to cover a lot in those areas, but I think over the years we've certainly learn more as a country and as the Department of Defense and the VA that we need to be having these conversations earlier with service members. So sorry to put you on the spot with that, but it popped into my head as you were speaking earlier, so I wanted to ask the question.
No, I'm happy to talk to that. And, just like you, I have experienced the TAP process, as I had to go through with everyone else when we were getting out, of going through those mandatory classes, taking those mandatory steps. Now, in my work with the In Transition program, we have many direct ties to the folks over at TAP. We try to make sure that the TAP counselors have psychological health resources that are readily available. If any of these topics come up, that they can, directly make a warm handoff, that they can get on the phone with our programs and make sure that service members taken care of. Now, in our work with TAP, it's fascinating the amount of work they put into program improvement, right? And so it's really to the point where I did some outreach events where I went to talk to TAP counselors, and parts of the program for me were really unrecognizable, right? That the psychologists that work with the program and the program managers are constantly working with industry, with other best practices for hiring to add more things in. Right. And it's to the point where you have a conversation with those groups, and all of our experience is a little dated. Right. It's been a couple of years at least since I went through TAP. And I might say, what would really help TAP is something like this. And they'll come back with the question, well, what year did you go through? And then they'll immediately say, we have that. Right. And it really translates into, there are hundreds and thousands of dollars of things like resume help, things like, job referral and everything else that's baked into the TAP program now. That really, if you're within 365 days of, ringing the bell and saying, okay, I'm getting out, that you can start using those resources and start leveraging those resources, all of which are free. Right? Free to use, free to say, I really want to have a positive transition. I don't want to be one of the vets that feels lost during my transition from active duty to an honorable, transition to being a veteran. And it really then is incumbent on us to not say, well, I'm going to do this myself. Like, I have a plan. I think I'm going to do some maybe online school, or I'd really like to maybe open a tattoo shop. Okay, TAP has something that's going to help with all of those things, right? TAP can help facilitate getting something like an SBA loan for veterans, that they can get in there and start their own business, right? Make sure that you don't fall into any of the pitfalls of the GI Bill and not get your full benefit, right? And so, so many of those things I think have improved, and that program is so open to, hey, if there's another industry best practice that we're not using, we'll bake it in and it will be there next year. And so, I hope that answers your question there. That I have seen it is vastly improved, and really, as much as we can encourage our fellow service members who are getting out now, like, hey, use every single resource, make TAP your place of duty for that last year, and you're going to come out, in a great place as a veteran.
No, that's good to hear, and I agree. That's certainly the advice I give to folks that are transitioning out now. Is I think it's almost overwhelming, and people are surprised by how many resources DoD and VA has that they just don't know about. And sometimes that's because when you're transitioning out, I came off active duty after 6 years. I think it's different if you're coming off after a shorter stint as opposed to retiring after 20 plus years. You're kind of just ready for the next thing, and you're not necessarily looking to DoD to help you in that. You just kind of want to get out. But the reality is there are a ton of resources, as you said, that really can help you, because there's probably been a lot of people before you that have gone through the same thing. So it's just a matter of getting folks to those. So that's great to hear, though. The TAP has definitely improved. I know we hear a lot of complaints about it, but sometimes I think it's just because it's an overwhelming amount of information people are trying to deal with. So Hannah, thank you. I appreciate you letting me jump in. I'll pass it back over to you.
Of course. I think we have a few questions that have come in. So Victor from IAVA is on, and he can open that up for us.
Yes, thank you so much, Hannah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. We have a really good question that just came in. This question is for everyone. How can we slow the departure of doctors after the time comfortability level gets right with me? They then move along to a bigger and better job, etc. And I have to start all over, which just makes me feel like a failure. How do I deal with that?
That's a great question. I'll first give kind of a mini response to that. That's a problem across the board, right? For folks, especially if you're seeing a therapist, for example, and then they keep moving on and leaving. That happens to a lot of our QRF clients who are receiving care at the VA. So they have great interns that are there who are doing phenomenal work. They create that bond, they're starting to do the real work, and then lo and behold, that person's gone. And I know personally that can be incredibly difficult. So I'll pass it over to you, Dr. Hoyt, if you have more you kind of want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a struggle, right? That you open up and you have this therapeutic relationship with a particular therapist or doctor, and you feel like you're making progress. You're feeling like, okay, I've finally reached the point where I can really tell them what's wrong. And that's like the week when they say, okay, my internship is now over, and now I'm going down to Bay Pines, VA, or wherever else, because that's where I got hired on, as a permanent staff or something. And it's crushing, right? It's like I've invested so much in this relationship, and now I feel like I have to start over, right? But let's reframe that a little bit, right? Say you did a 20-year career in the military, and the whole time you were just at the same installation, right? Like you never PCS'd, you never went and did any other kind of specialized training. My guess is your career would not be what it could have been if you'd gone down to Fort Polk and then up to Fort Drum and then all over the country, right? How much more that builds. Now, how do I work that analogy in, right? Every time that you're faced with the burden of this therapist is terminating with me or is moving on to another position, you've got that opportunity to reshape that and say, I want to do something more this time, right? I've gotten this far with this therapist, but it can be real easy to just fall into the trap of, okay, we're just going to chit chat about what I've done this week, but I'm not going to make any real changes. Right. And if a new therapist comes in, that I think can be an opportunity for you to say, what more am I going to do? How am I going to really challenge myself to say, I'm going to do more this time. I'm going to do even more with this therapist to take the next several steps toward my recovery. Right. I would also view that as a time when you can say, it's a natural break point to be able to say, this is not going to be a forever relationship with any therapist, right? And really say, I want to get done quickly what I can in terms of building recovery, because I know this isn't going to be permanent. Right. And not to say that that's throwing up a barrier, but that's saying this is going to be a quick and intense relationship where we get a lot done. I'm going to do every homework assignment. I'm going to do everything, that goes along with whatever treatment modality we're using. And I'm going to show those gains. And if we're bought in that way, it doesn't matter if we have that relationship with a particular therapist, because the person responsible for our recovery is us, right? We are the ones responsible. And then we're not trying to cast blame on anyone else. We're not trying to say, well, I had a good therapist for a while, but then this new one came in and they didn't know what they were doing. Well, you should have all of the knowledge from that first therapist still, build on it. And speaking as someone who has done a lot of training new interns that I've had to mentor, help them along too, right? They're, if you've had experience with a good therapist and you say, well, really the best way to do this is to ask the question this way, this is going to be more effective, that can really build that relationship in a way that says we are in this together. Because I guarantee that new therapist really is still all in for your recovery the same way that the old therapist was.
Absolutely. And I'd add to that too, encourage folks. I know how gutting it can be when a therapist moves on, but to reframe it in a certain way too, to give yourself credit for the work that was done and the progress that was made in that relationship. That didn't happen because you sat there passively and you had this brilliant therapist that came in and took a magic wand and fixed all your problems for you. That was real work that you did for yourself. And as Dr. Hoyt said, you can continue to build on that, and that's incredibly powerful. Great. Are there any other questions that came in, Victor?
Yes, thank you so much for that answer. That was amazing. Uh, Next question is, I've read that if I'm worried about someone being at risk for suicide, I should just come out and ask them if they're going to kill themselves. This kind of scares me, and I'm afraid if I bring up suicide, maybe it will push that person further in that direction. What do I do?
Sure. So I know we touched on that a little bit earlier, but just to reiterate a little bit about that, it's not going to plant a seed if you say the word suicide. If anything, it's going to show that person that you're invested in them and that you're going to be there for them and that you care and that you're not alone. Anything else to add to that, Dr. Hoyt?
I think there are gentle ways to ask as well, right? And we do this with rookie therapists, who might come out and be very blunt and say, well, have you been thinking of killing yourself? And it comes across the wrong way. It comes across accusatory, right? A gentler way to ask that question is always, reflect back what you've been listening to already. If they're saying, hey, I hear you've been having a lot of problems at home, and you've been struggling with work, and it's really been getting you down. Those kind of times can be a time when we all start to struggle, when we all start to have difficult days and darker thoughts. And on those difficult days, do you ever start to maybe think about suicide, or do you ever have thoughts of suicide, like maybe that would be the easier way out? And you can ask in gentle ways, that are less difficult in a lot of ways, right? Because you are just asking out of concern, right? It's not an accusation. You're not a detective trying to find this. This is just, hey, I'm genuinely worried. And by the way, I watched this, IAVA pod or a webcast the other day, and I want to understand more how you're experiencing these things. And if they say no, that's no harm. Like, that's not some accusation like, how dare you accuse me of feeling suicidal? That only shows, like, I care about you enough even to ask this tough question. And then, just as we said earlier, let's take some steps together to help you feel more safe.
Those are some really, really helpful tips. That's great. Victor, did we have anything else come in?
Not yet. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I think we can move towards wrapping it up. For anyone that is watching or that ends up seeing this video, I just want to reiterate that the holidays can be a difficult time. Life can be difficult in general. And our quick reaction force is standing by to help literally any veteran, any family member. It doesn't matter when you served, where you served, how you served. We're here for you. We're 24/7. You can call us anytime, day or night. That's 855-91-RAPID. You can also find us online if you don't want to call us, quickreactionforce.org. And, you're not alone. There's help out there. There's hope out there, and we'll all kind of get through these times together. I want to also just thank you again, Dr. Hoyt, for your incredible expertise and experience and thoughtfulness and giving your time to us and the community to share all the many amazing things you had to share today. Jeremy, I'll hand it over to you if you have anything else. And then Dr. Hoyt, of course, if you want to close out anything, we'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And I'll just reiterate my thanks to Dr. Hoyt. It's great having you here and great hearing from you. Great conversation. I know these are challenging times with the combination of the holidays and COVID. So I think really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And so I will pass it over to you for any closing comments you have.
I'll just close out with the reminder, reaching out is always a sign of strength. None of us are alone who've worn the uniform, and all of our brothers and sisters are available. Reach out, and I think you'll be surprised how many other hands are there to help lift you.
Beautiful. Wonderful
Excellent.
finishing words. Well, thank you again. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. And I think that's a wrap.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.